All right. So obviously I was going to do e-bikes. I liked David's joke. So I'm excluding e-bikes that run on hydrogen power, which actually there is a model if you look up. It's probably the most stupid way to use hydrogen is in an e-bike. But anyway.
I don't know. There's giant dirigible carrying a lot of tourists who like fire, but sorry.
No, that's okay. Okay, well, maybe we come back to the hydrogen e-bike, but the e-bikes I'm talking about, they look a lot like a regular bike. They can be big enough to carry more things. They can be a cargo bike. They can be small and look like just a regular bike with a motor. Importantly, we need to have, smart regulations to have them speed limited to reasonable levels. We're not going to have e-motorcycles masquerading as e-bikes. But I think that they have a very high likelihood of adoption. They are very fit for a certain purpose. And I remember in an early episode, we had Petra Delata a couple of years back, Dr. Delata, talking about how cars actually didn't have an obvious use case when they were brought in, and people had to kind of figure out how to integrate them into their daily life. And I think that's what e-bikes look like. Obviously, you're not going to ride an e-bike across Canada, or you're not going to do that regularly. But there is a lot of ways in a country like Canada or the US or in Europe that they can be used. So I pulled some numbers. So in Canada, over 20% of daily commutes are less than 5 kilometers and by car. And in fact, the people that commute by car, only 30% commute more than 10 kilometers, which is a pretty reasonable distance to go on an e-bike. 46% of Canadian households have 2 cars. So the idea of replacing one car with a couple of e-bikes, which is much, much cheaper than running a car, I think is very possible. They're also very easy to charge, and they kind of get rid of a lot of the challenges with e-vehicles, e-cars, in that it's easy to swap out batteries, or you can bring them inside, charge them inside off a regular battery. And we see this in the global growth. So in 2024, there were about 9 million two-wheel vehicles, two-wheel e-bike-like things sold. Majority of that, over 50% in China. But also, a number in other places as well. And that's actually leading to some pretty significant displacement of oil already. So this really can have a big impact in the transportation sector. So in 2023, the 2- and 3-wheeled e-vehicles were displacing about 1 million barrels of oil globally. And that's compared to only about 400,000 barrels of oil displaced by passenger vehicle EVs. So they're actually making a bigger dent already than passenger EVs. And there's actually a lot that we can do in terms of design of cities and regions to increase cycling. A big part of that is really just providing safe places to cycle. So Paris is a really interesting example of that. In 2024, somewhere in the range, depending on what kind of trips you're looking at, of 11 to 14% of trips in Paris were taken by bike after the city had made a big push to make places for cycling, which was a doubling of the number of folks that were cycling only a few years before. So I think this is, it's not going to be the be all end all. We're not going to go everywhere on an e-bike, but I think it has huge potential.
I'm stoked. I bicycled this morning on my e-bike, although I have a really nice e-bike that I can is actually nice with the E turned off. So today I had the E turned off, but on the way home, if I'm tired or the wind's against me, I'll turn the E on. And I'm completely sold on these things, and I'm also really excited. Just came back from an amazing trip to India, where I was talking with some people in the government transportation department there about how to accelerate e-bike penetration. I think it's real and exciting. My one caveat is not a knock on e-bikes. It's a knock on regulators, that there's basically been a kind of trick where people are using things that are basically e-motorcycles, where you don't have to pedal in ways that are dangerous. And I think that needs to get fixed, but that's not a knock on e-bikes. It's just saying we need to have regulations that match the kind of actual spectrum of devices out there.
I would agree. I mean, in terms of e-bikes, like, what's not to like? They're a huge success story. They're fun. They're practical. They replace those short car trips. For me, maybe getting to your point, I'm seeing them all the time, including on the mountain bike trails that I ride, or you're going into the backcountry of protected areas and you're seeing e-bikes there. So to your point, it is a regulator question of just trying to draw the line, because there are lots of climate benefits, but there are some conservation disbenefits when you allow people to go further and farther and faster into the backcountry. and the attendant impacts you have on wildlife there. But that's something regulators just have to catch up. But other than that, I mean, it truly is a good news story.
Yeah, I mean, I was in New York for Climate Week the last few days. I almost got run over by somebody moving very fast on one of these so-called e-bikes, but really an e-motorcycle, no pedaling needed, on the sidewalk. And I think, I mean, again, this is what's happening is this wonderful proliferation of cool new technologies, and it's gone ahead of regulation. And we can have sensible regs, we just don't now.
Yeah, I think that has to happen, and it has to happen in a good way, right? I mean, the risk is always that you put in regulations that end up limiting things, or, and a big part of that is making sure that we're allocating enough space and not taking away space from pedestrians. But, ideally in cities, and I think that's what Paris shows really interestingly. They didn't, kind of do this in a pilot way, dabbling here and there, but really going all in and saying, how do we limit places where cars are going in the middle of cities? Of course, being careful to make sure that people that have disabilities and special needs can still get around by car there. But you have to kind of go all in.
Well, the one thing you said, Sarah, you said you're not going to see people riding e-bikes across Canada. Why? I bet you they already are riding e-bikes. I've got friends who are doing, bike tours in the Pyrenees with e-bikes.
Yeah, no, totally fair. I think what I mean by that is sometimes when you bring up some of these technologies, people say, well, I'm not going to take my family vacation, every year on an e-bike across the country. And it's this idea that, of course, a given technology is not going to, replace all of the transportation needs we have.